You trusted someone. You gave them your time, your attention, maybe your loyalty. And somewhere along the way, without ever being able to point to a single moment and say there, that was it, you started to feel smaller, confused, like you were always the one apologizing, always the one who got things wrong. You couldn't explain it to anyone else because nothing dramatic had happened, nothing you could name. That feeling is exactly where covert manipulation lives. The word manipulation gets used loosely. In psychology, it refers to influence attempts that are underhanded or subtle, designed to bypass your conscious reasoning and steer your behavior without your full awareness. That distinction matters. Not every uncomfortable interaction is manipulation. Not every person who upsets you is doing it deliberately. But when influence is consistently covert, consistently one-directional, and consistently leaves you doubting your own perception, something worth understanding is happening. The cost of missing it is real, not because you are weak or foolish, but because these patterns are specifically designed to be hard to see. People who experience them often describe a slow erosion of confidence, of clarity, of their sense of what is normal. By the time the pattern becomes visible, it has often been running for months or years. That is not a failure of intelligence. It is a feature of how the pattern works. So let's talk about the mechanism. Human beings are social creatures. We rely on shared reality. When someone we trust tells us we are remembering something wrong, we take that seriously. When someone we care about seems hurt by our behavior, we feel responsible. When we are made to feel that our emotional reactions are excessive, we start to self-censor. These are not weaknesses. They are the ordinary features of empathy and social trust. Covert manipulation exploits exactly those features, not by attacking them directly, but by quietly redirecting them. One of the most documented patterns involves the gradual redefinition of what is reasonable. It does not start with something obviously wrong. It starts with small corrections, a slight reframing of what you said, a gentle suggestion that you are being too sensitive. Over time, your baseline for what counts as acceptable shifts. You stop raising concerns because you have learned through repetition that raising them leads to feeling worse, not better. The manipulation does not need to be loud. It works through accumulation, and that accumulation is precisely what makes it so difficult to name while it is happening. Consider a situation from the target's perspective. You bring up something that bothered you, a comment that felt dismissive, a plan that was changed without you. The response is not engagement with what you said. Instead, the conversation pivots. Suddenly, you are discussing your tone, your history of overreacting, your tendency to make things difficult. You leave the conversation having defended yourself rather than addressed the original concern, and you feel somehow guilty. That pivot, away from the issue and toward your character, is a recognizable pattern worth knowing. It is not an argument. It is a redirection, and it works because you care about being fair. Here is another scenario. You are in a relationship, personal or professional, where praise and warmth come in unpredictable bursts. When things are good, they are genuinely good. But the warmth disappears without explanation, and you find yourself working to get back to that good place without knowing what changed. You start monitoring the other person's mood carefully. You adjust your behavior preemptively. You become focused on managing their emotional state rather than your own. The unpredictability itself becomes a mechanism of control, even if no single moment looks like control. You are not responding to what someone did. You are responding to the uncertainty of what they might do next. A third pattern involves the use of your own values against you. If you care about being fair, you will be reminded of your past mistakes when you raise a concern. If you care about loyalty, setting a limit will be framed as betrayal. If you care about being a good person, your discomfort will be reframed as selfishness. The manipulation does not fight your values, it uses them as leverage. And because your values are genuinely yours, the pressure feels internal, like a conclusion you reached yourself. What interrupts these patterns? Usually, it is a moment of external reference, a conversation with someone outside the dynamic who reflects back a different version of events. A journal entry that lets you see the pattern across time rather than in isolated moments. A therapist or counselor who helps you distinguish between your own perception and the version of reality you have been handed. The pattern depends on isolation, not always physical isolation, but perceptual isolation. Breaking that isolation is often what makes the pattern visible for the first time. If you are trying to recognize whether something like this is happening to you, there are a few concrete things worth noticing. Do you regularly leave conversations feeling worse about yourself than when you entered them? Do you find it difficult to identify what you actually want or feel, separate from what the other person wants or feels? Do you spend significant mental energy anticipating and managing someone else's reactions? Do your concerns consistently get redirected back to your own flaws rather than addressed on their own terms? None of these observations on their own confirms anything. Context matters. Relationships are complicated, but a consistent pattern across all of them over time is worth taking seriously, not as a verdict, but as a signal that something deserves closer attention. If you recognize the pattern, the response is not retaliation, and it is not a dramatic confrontation. It is, first, documentation. Write things down. Not to build a case against anyone, but to give yourself an accurate record of what actually happened. One of the effects of these patterns is that your memory of events becomes unreliable, not because your memory is bad, but because it has been consistently contested. A written record restores your access to your own experience and gives you something solid to return to when your perception is being questioned. The second response is distance. Not necessarily permanent, but enough to think clearly. Physical or conversational space from the dynamic gives your nervous system a chance to recalibrate. You may find that your sense of what is normal shifts quickly once you are outside the immediate pressure of the relationship. That shift itself is informative. The third response, when the pattern is serious or long-standing, is professional support. A qualified therapist can help you work through what happened without judgment, and can help you rebuild the internal reference points that these patterns tend to erode. That is not a sign that something is permanently wrong with you. It is a practical tool for recovery, and seeking it is a form of self-respect. One important limit to name here. Recognizing a behavior pattern in someone's actions is not the same as diagnosing them. Psychology has clinical terms for certain personality structures, and those terms exist for a reason. But they belong in clinical settings, applied by trained professionals, not in everyday arguments or online comment sections. The behavior pattern is what you can observe. The internal experience of the other person is not yours to diagnose, and attempting to do so usually makes things harder, not easier. Focus on what you experienced and what you need, not on labeling someone else. It is also worth saying that not every difficult relationship involves deliberate manipulation. People can be thoughtless, defensive, or emotionally immature without being calculating. The distinction matters for how you respond. But whether the harm is intentional or not, your experience of it is real, and your right to protect yourself from it does not depend on proving intent. Go back to where we started. You trusted someone. You gave them your time and your attention, and somewhere along the way, you started to feel smaller. Now you have a name for the mechanism. You know what the pattern looks like from the inside. You know what the pivot feels like, what the unpredictability costs you, and how your own values can be turned into pressure. You know what interrupts it. That knowledge does not undo what happened, but it changes what happens next. It gives you back the one thing these patterns work hardest to take, your own clear sense of what is real. The question worth sitting with is this: now that you can see the pattern for what it is, what would you do differently? This material is educational and defensive. Use it to recognize manipulation and protect yourself, never to harm, control, or manipulate others. The Dark Mind Ledger. Understand the pattern. Protect yourself. This content is for educational and defensive purposes only. Understanding these tactics helps you recognize and protect yourself from manipulation. It is not intended to harm others.